executive director for Carpenter Shelter for 10 years. And he has overseen a very big change in Carpenter Shelter from when we had the first facility. I think it was, did we buy that and own that, Shannon, the smaller facility? But great things have happened there. But the first thing is, what do they do for the homeless in our community? He'll share that. And then a very major achievement by the city, by Carpenters first, the city and religious groups here, to have its own specially built facility with increased capacity. And also, and I'm in the world of affordable housing before I retired, but 78 or 94 affordable rental housing units right there with the shelter above it. Before coming to Carpenters, Shannon served for 2 years on the staff of Lutheran Services in America, assisting 300 human service organizations. I don't know how you keep track of all of those, Shannon, but you can tell us. His initial homeless assistance skills began with 13 years of working for and then leading Good Shepherd Housing and Family Services, focused on preventing homelessness in Fairfax County. Thank you for coming to speak with us today, Shannon. And all of you, I'm sure you will learn a lot from him, and particularly the facility here that is so important. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, good morning to everybody. Good morning. My name is Shannon. I'm honored to be here to speak with you. And I actually do not have slides. I will instead request if there are 3 more volunteers that will help me out. Can I see just 3 hands? It's really easy, I guarantee. Excellent. There's one. Excellent. We've got one right here, and I need one final volunteer. Excellent. Great, great, great. Okay. Here's the instructions for the volunteers, but everybody can hear them. Instead of having slides, there should be, if you have a card, a little green number in the corner of the card. And so when I ask for what that number is, I just need you to say whatever the card says in black. Think we can handle this? We can do this, people. All right. Again, my name is Shannon. I'm honored to serve as the executive director of the Carpenter Shelter. Carpenter Shelter provides the widest array of services for people that are homeless in the city of Alexandria. We've been doing it for a long time. We've been doing it since the mid-1980s. Beginning in the basement of Blessed Sacrament Catholic Church, there was a pair of guys that were homeless. They were going to be on the church doorstep. And the priest said, no, 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 no. So we brought them in to get them out of the cold. And pretty soon there were 10 cots and a casserole brigade that got started. And that is the roots of the Carpenter Shelter. Very humble beginnings, very much an expression of when a community bands together, we can do some pretty unbelievable things. And today, that community that's doing those unbelievable things is made up of 1,200 volunteers. James had mentioned having served at the shelter in the kitchen, but people have been doing all sorts of different things to support the work and mission of the shelter. So, quick show of hands if you have ever volunteered for the Carpenter Shelter. Excellent. I think I've got a dedicated and sympathetic audience to what it is that we're going to talk about today. So with that, who happens to have card with a little green 1 in the corner? There we go. John, what does it say? 981. 981. Last year, Carpenter Shelter assisted 981 people in our community that needed services and support. That's a lot of people. 981 people. Further, 1,200 is the number of volunteers that we engaged last year in that work of the shelter. It's a lot of people, not only that are receiving the services and support, but that are also rolling up their sleeves and seeing that work and mission in such a direct way. Paired with the 1,200 volunteers a year, we have about 65 staff. 65 people that are on our staff team, and several hundred donor households as well. I think of it like a big group project. And I think of my role in many ways as like the mayor of a small town. I grew up in a small town, 704 people in rural Minnesota. And what happens when things are going right and you need somebody to cut the ribbon or to, lead some sort of little ceremony? Well, you bring in the mayor. But what also happens when things aren't going right and you really need to get someone's attention to take care of it? You're probably going to look to the mayor as well in that sense. And those are all roles that I'm very honored to serve. All right. Who happens to have the card with the green 2 on it? Is there anyone that has the green 2? Yes. What does your card say? 178. 178. Last night, we had 178 shelter beds available for people in our community. 178. Hi, Ann. How are you? There are times when it is very routine for me to think about what it is that we do and who we're helping, and then there are times when it really sets me back on my heels. And when I think about 178 people, it stuns me. Yes. Do we have children in shelter? Yes. Yes. That includes services for children. Actually, that's a great question. And who happens to have card number 3? Yes. 4. What do you think 4 is? 4 is the number of shelters that we operate at any given time. Our main shelter is at 930 North Henry Street. It's down by the Braddock Metro. If you know where the McDonald's on Route 1 is or the Yates Car Wash, we're right next door. And so our main shelter is at 930 North Henry Street. It includes 64 beds of shelter for families with children. There are more children in that shelter than there are adults. And so I can tell you this, you will hear peals of laughter, and anytime you get small children in, you will also hear some wails in the mix there. And those two go hand in hand. I can tell you that that is our principal shelter when we think about what is quintessentially Carpenters. The second is another 64-bed shelter, and that's in the Carlisle neighborhood. We operate that in partnership with the city of Alexandria. That also has 6 families with children, 24 single men, and 15 to 18 single women at any given time. Our third shelter is a hypothermia shelter. When it starts to get cold, starting in November and running through the middle of April, we also offer an additional 50 beds of shelter. It's primarily people that are single that are in that hypothermia shelter, and it's definitely more men than single women in that hypothermia shelter. Our fourth shelter is a day shelter. It's for people that are chronically homeless and they're not as interested in coming in and being sheltered, but they still need help. And so what happens in a day shelter? They come in, they can take a shower, they can do their laundry, they can get themselves cleaned up and their clothes cleaned up. They have a little bit of continental breakfast, and we try and establish a relationship with them. We want to get to know them. If we get to know them and they get to know us, they're more likely to work with us on permanent housing. Because if you boil it down to its simplest, homelessness is just a lack of housing. And our job is to walk alongside people and help them find and keep housing they can afford. So, do we have children? Absolutely. And those kids tend to skew younger. So, last week, there were 40 children in that 64-bed shelter, and they skew very young. So, we've got more infants and toddlers in shelter than we've got elementary age kids, and more elementary age kids than teens and tweens. When the kids are that little, usually the parents are younger as well. And so it's very young families that we tend to have in the shelter. Yeah. Families are with us for about 4 months before we can get them rehoused. It takes about 4 months. And the real hunt in all of that is to find the housing that they can afford. If you are a single person and we're helping you find housing, we can usually get you out in about 3 months. Singles, a lot more of them just rent a room in somebody's house. They don't need an entire apartment. It's less expensive if they just rent a room than if they have an entire apartment. And that's how we usually make that happen. Okay, so I think, have we done card number 4 yet? No. Who's got the green 4? Yes. Seniors. Any guesses? Seniors, actually, I'm not going to tell you how many seniors we have. I'm going to tell you this. Seniors are the fastest growing population of people that are homeless. It is sobering and stunning. Average life expectancy for people that are homeless is actually a lot less than the general population. According to the National Council for the Homeless, average life expectancy is about 78 years. Average life expectancy, if you are chronically homeless, is 45 to 55. And so when we talk about seniors, we tend to skew that number a little bit younger because their medical age does not usually match their biological age. Yeah, it is a wow for sure. The main things that we see with seniors and people that are older that are homeless is that decreased mobility happens faster and cognitive decline happens faster. And it's really hard when you've got that limited mobility and the cognitive decline. If they've lost their housing and we need to help them oftentimes take a look at what their income is. For people that are younger, it's usually how do we help them get a better job than what they have currently? How do we help them earn more? And when you've got that limited mobility and the cognitive decline, that is a superb challenge in the worst sort of way. And so seniors are a tough nut to crack for how do we help them get rehoused in the community. All right, so that was card 4. Who happens to have 5? Betsy. $2,226. Any guesses? That is not the annual income, but that's a great guess. That is the average amount of rent for a 2-bedroom unit we are dealing with a population of people that are earning, at best, if we can get them to earning 30% of the median income, we feel like we're really doing well to help them along. But oftentimes they're earning less than that. And $2,226 is the fair market rent for a 2-bedroom unit in the city of Alexandria. It's a tough challenge. We happen to have housing locators on our staff team. They're licensed real estate agents. If homelessness is a lack of housing, their job is not to be a social worker. Their job is to find housing that's affordable and then match that up with what our residents need for size, and if there are any geographic constraints that need to be thought of and factored in, then we'll work with that as well. And it's a tough challenge, to be sure. It's a lot of money in rental costs. We do have some short-term help. When we first get people in, oftentimes we're helping them with their security deposit and their first month's rent, and maybe a couple months of a little bit of help, but they need to be able to bear that cost ultimately on their own. And it's a quandary for sure. This can feel like a not very uplifting topic at times. And I feel like we're in the trough of that right now, but hold on, it's going to get better. All right, so that was 5. Who has 6? Yes. Dozens. That could go a lot of different directions, couldn't it? I mentioned we have 1,200 volunteers a year. Many, many, many of those volunteers are coming from faith communities. Carpenters started in the basement of Blessed Sacrament Catholic Church, but the amount of support that is coming from faith communities is simply wonderful. I mentioned we were in that trough, but it's going to get better. I can tell you that what faith communities do to put their values and their beliefs into action is top-notch. Carpenters serves 3 meals a day, 365 days a year, and we have no paid kitchen staff. It is volunteers that are literally rolling up their sleeves. And in a society where food is love, they are showing tremendous amounts of love for their neighbors that are struggling. I have many, many colleagues that run great nonprofits in the community. And they hear that we serve 3 meals a day, every day of the year, and we have no kitchen staff, and they think it's bananas. And I think it's bananas sometimes too, but what a wonderful display of what people can do to help one another in such a tangible fashion. All right, so that was 5? That was 6. Who's hanging on to number 7? James. Our plan. Carpenter's Shelter has a strategic plan, and it's got 3 main pillars to it. And we picked a word for each of those pillars. The first of them is sustain. There are things that Carpenter's Shelter and its community are doing today that we need to continue to do into the future. If we had 178 beds of shelter last night, that's probably not something that we can just make go away anytime soon. And so it's figuring out, as we plan for the future, how do we continue in a very fiscally responsible way to do what we're currently doing where we know there's such dire need. And the middle of those pillars, because there are 3 of them, the middle one we call elevate. There are things that we do that we know we've got core competencies. We know we can help people move along from homeless to housed. And if we just do a slight tweak to things, just an incremental change here and there, how can we be better, faster, and stronger? Many of the people that we work with we have to help them find better jobs. About half of the adults coming into shelter are already working. It's not that they don't have a job for half of them. It's just not enough. And so for that half, it's, do we help them find an additional job? Do we help them find a better job? And for that half that isn't working, we certainly need to figure out, how do we help address that? And so workforce development is probably one of those things in that middle elevate column that we're taking a look at. How do we help people earn more to be more stable? We think our residents are great, but we really only want to see them that one time when they're in the shelter. We hope they will not cycle back through. We hope. The third of our pillars we call Explore. Carpenter Shelter is very well known for sheltering people that are homeless and getting people rehoused. But there might be ways that we can live out our work and our mission very different from what we're doing right now. And we're open to that possibility. And so that's part of the exploration for us in that Explore category. With our plan, the one thing we do not want to lose is that spirit of the community. There are times when we've looked at, should we just hire kitchen staff? It would be much more effective and efficient in a, how do we actually get food on the plate? But I can tell you this, and from the number of hands that came up, the people that feel they know carpenters and that they believe in carpenters because they are part of that solution is part of our secret sauce. It is part of our secret sauce. All right, so that was our plan, which was number 7. Was that right? Was that card 7? Okay. All right, so who is hanging on to card 8? Yes. Macy's. Who all has shopped at Macy's? They just put on a big parade a week and a half ago? James had talked about one of the big projects. I joined Team Carpenters in 2015, and at the time we were operating out of the old Department of Motor Vehicles building at 930 North Henry Street. It was safe and it was suitable. We are very fortunate that we could be operating out of that for 20 years. But because homelessness is a lack of housing, and because that was our biggest financial asset that we had, we knew that a higher and better use could come from that same plot of land. And so earlier this morning, I was down at 930 North Henry Street at my office doing a couple things. We are now the primary use on the main floor of the building, and there are 6 floors of affordable housing up above us. Kind of stunning. Who has card 9? Because I think it comes into play here. Yes. 97 affordable apartments are in those top 6 floors. All of those are dedicated affordable, which means that for families with children, there are some micro units, they call them, permanent supportive housing. Think very small efficiency apartments. I had talked before about we have our day shelter for people that are chronically homeless. It's called David's Place. And 10 of those units upstairs are permanent supportive housing. Think 350 square feet. So tiny little efficiency apartment. But we moved people from David's Place up into an apartment, and many of them are still stably housed up there. The property management company from our partner, Housing Alexandria. They serve as the landlord. They wear the landlord hat in that equation. And then Carpenters has staff and volunteers that meet with those 10 residents to keep them stably housed. That means maybe if they've been getting some SNAP benefits, some food stamps, SNAP, some type of food-related assistance. Sometimes if that goes away and they haven't renewed their application for that, those are the kinds of things that Carpenters staff are helping them with. If they need help filing taxes, if they need help navigating various and sundry things, that's what we're there to do. If we can keep the people permanently housed, that's great. When we filled those 10 units, we ran statistics on what was the average length of homelessness that those 10 residents had had. On average, they had been homeless for 9 years. So they went from a long time of being unsheltered up into living in an apartment. Did we see some colorful behavior when they first got rehoused? You betcha. You bet we did. But many of them are still there. And I can tell you, I used to have a little dog, and the dog would come to the shelter with me. His name was Bobo. He was with me until about a year ago. And so I would take Bobo out every midday to do his midday constitutional. And so I would see people that I knew were being served by Carpenter Shelter on the sidewalk, walking to and fro. And once we filled those 10 units up above, I knew that some of the people I was seeing on the sidewalk were now living upstairs. Their posture was different. They would have eye contact with me. They would always interact with the dog, but now they would interact with me. Being housed, it just gives them a different carriage, a different way of walking and being. It really is stunning work that is being done. All right, who has card number 9? Did we already do 9? We did 9. 9 is Macy's. While I started at the old DMV building, and now at that same address is a 7-story building. We built out the old Macy's at Landmark Mall. We operated out of there for 2.5 years. It was a crazy time. I can tell you that when we first moved all of the residents and the staff, they woke up at 930 North Henry Street. There was a small army of people with a set of moving vans and trucks. And our residents and staff that night had dinner at the Macy's, and we were there for 2.5 years. We shared the Macy's building with the cast and crew of the latest Wonder Woman movie. So there were more security on site than I think I'd ever seen, which was fascinating. And the main actress in the movie, she was practicing jumping. They had 2 big cranes out in the parking lot. And I think I see some unique things with Carpenter Shelter, and that was certainly one of them. As we were building that, I started telling the story of Carpenters through the facilities we've operated out of. And Ann knows this. Basement of Blessed Sacrament, and then they were going to renovate the church, and so then it became donated warehouse space off of Duke Street. Yep. The stories that I have been told about the Duke Street warehouse include, yes, what comes to mind for you for the Duke Street?
The bathroom facilities, they just weren't available. I mean, it was just very, I have to use the word dirty. It was just not proper at all. But it was at least a place for people to come and stay. But it was chaos, a lot of chaos there.
Chaos is a great word for it. Olfactory is a very powerful sense. It's a very powerful sense. And numerous volunteers from when the shelter was operating out of the warehouse talked about when people were standing in line for dinner, you could smell laundry detergent and the casserole brigade. You could smell the food and the laundry soap because it was ropes with sheets over the top to delineate the rooms. Very, very humble as our second of those facilities. Third facility, another warehouse. This time by the Wythe Street Post Office. Then we ended up buying the old DMV, and we were there for about 20 years, and then move across town 2.5 years into the old Macy's, and now back to 930 North Henry Street in a purpose-built space. There is an underground parking garage underneath us, Carpenters as the main function of the first floor, and then the top, again, 6 floors, those 97 apartments. I mentioned there were some miracles of Carpenters. I think one of those miracles came when we were building that building. And our partner, the affordable housing developer, said to me, Shannon, so we need to go to a public hearing before the Planning Commission. And if we get approved there, then we go to a public hearing before the City Council. Every colleague I know that has built a new building has said that the public hearings can be the absolute worst. And now let's have a public hearing about a new homeless shelter with affordable housing on top. We followed a very contentious schools issue the night of the Planning Commission. And our docket item got started at 11:15 p.m. People were tired, they were stirred up, and now let's talk about a new shelter with affordable housing involved. And one person had signed up to testify. She was the head of the local neighborhood association. And I was so ready for we were just going to get blasted. And Judy's testimony started with, this is exactly the project we want to see in Braddock, and we're so excited the Carpenters will still have a place. I looked around like, where is the candid camera? And we got unanimous approval. And 10 days later, we were standing before the City Council, and it was largely a rinse and repeat of unbelievably positive things that were said about the project and what it was that we were doing. That 2 trusted nonprofits, Housing Alexandria and the Carpenter Shelter, were working together to address a dire community need. I am convinced, and this is just from the Book of Shannon, there's nothing official about it, I am convinced that part of the secret sauce that makes those sorts of interactions happen is because of the 1,200 volunteers a year. That so many people are invited in to literally see the people that are being served and to themselves literally serve the people. And it helps demystify what's going on, what is the need, and do we really need this? And the sad reality is we really do need this in our community. The great reality is it is one big whopping group project. And people do what they can do in order to make it happen. And I feel so fortunate for being able to be part of it. I think there's one card left out there. Excellent. Shift. Whew. I can tell you during my 10 years leading Team Carpenters, we've done a big shift here in our community. There is a big shift happening nationally as well. The Department of Housing and Urban Development is the federal department under which homelessness is generally funded. HUD's money specific to homelessness had about 73% of its funds going to permanent housing. There is coming up a cap that no more than 30% of that funding can be spent on permanent housing heading forward. And so the shift that I am watching for, and I frankly am not sure how it's going to come out. Maybe it'll come out swimmingly, but I'm not necessarily the most optimistic right now. But I'm just sharing with you because it's true. And I think it's going to be noticeable. As we go nationally from 73% down to no more than 30%, things are going to be changing in what is available to people that are homeless. And so some of those 10 apartments, for example, that we built above the shelter are the kinds of things that would have fallen in under that 73%. When I say that homelessness is a lack of housing, and we're now going to limit the resources that go into housing, we're going to need to get creative to figure out how do we do this. I don't know yet what the answer is, and we talked about those 3 pillars: sustain, elevate, and explore. That level of reduction is definitely going to have to fit in that explore bucket, because something new and something different is going to have to come from this. Maybe it'll be great, and I hope it is. And I can tell you, Carpenters is fully in the hunt for how do we do things as efficiently and effectively as possible. There's a long history of dedicated champions for the work and mission of the shelter. And I can tell you some of them are here in this room, and some of them live here at this property. And we are going to do this. We're going to figure out a way to make it work. We just don't necessarily know what that is right now. With our 10 slides, I have given you a lot of facts and figures and a few vignettes. What questions do you have for me? Yes.
Is there a connection between the leftover food at Goodwin House Alexandria and the shelter?
Is there a connection between Goodwin House?
Where does our food go? Is it there?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, good question. So the question was, when there's leftover food here at Goodwin House, does any of it come to the shelter? It has in the past. There is not right now, a regular process to make that happen. But I can tell you we are continuing to talk with the culinary team that's here. And Brian Patterson is our main person, and Brian is a top-notch fella with high levels of creativity, and we're so fortunate to be able to speak with him. In addition, I can tell you that Lindsay Hutter, who is one of the leadership here, Lindsay is on the board at the shelter, and so Goodwin Living and Carpenter Shelter do have frequent exchanges about how does Goodwin Living live out its mission? How does Carpenters do that? And we continue to explore what that looks like. Food is one of those venues. It's not the only thing that we're kicking around right now to see, are there ways in which we can be better, faster, and stronger together? Was that helpful to you?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Not much. I know that there's a lot of food that's left.
Yep.
I know that there's need.
Yes.
I understand why it can't come together better.
Yes. It's a great question, and we're looking at that as best as we can. Yes.
I have another question.
Yeah.
What is the genesis of this carpenter shelter?
Yeah. Where did Carpenter Shelter come from? It's a biblical illusion. You know, we started in the basement of Blessed Sacrament Catholic Church, and so Jesus as the great carpenter, that's where Carpenter Shelter comes from. It gets even deeper because the name of our day shelter is David's Place. David, power of the small guy, David and Goliath. And so that's where David's Place comes from as well. We are a secular nonprofit. As I mentioned earlier, we have dozens of faith communities that support us. Most of them are Christian faith communities, but not all, certainly Jewish, some Muslim congregations as well coming in to support the shelter. It is really such a big group project. Yeah. Yes. Oh. Here we go.
Number one, are we getting further and further behind or further and further ahead? And number two, Carpenter Shelter. Is this just for the evening for some people and then they have to leave in the morning?
Ooh, good
No.
questions. Good questions.
And where do they go when they leave in the morning? That's the
Yep.
question, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great questions. Do people have to leave during the day? The short answer is no. We have people, many do leave during the day because they're working and they've got to go to work and they take their kids to daycare and they head off to their job. And if they don't have a job, they're often out looking for one. But do they have to? No. I can tell you this. If you are ever at the shelter at between 9 and 9:30 at night, it's one of the most active places around. At the family shelter, the parents generally have put their kids to bed already, but then it's chore time. And so there is more mopping and sweeping and wiping and very trash hauling and whatnot, because again, it is a big group project and that the residents help with those chores as well. And the bulk of them are in the evening time just before bed. And so that's what happens there. Are we making progress is a great question. Once a year, the city of Alexandria does what's called a point-in-time count. On one day during the year, we count how many people are homeless in our community. And of those that are homeless, how many are sheltered and how many are unsheltered. This last January, on that one day, there were 166 people in our community that were homeless. 166. That's actually less than the year before, which is good news. When I said we also count how many were sheltered and how many were unsheltered, the vast majority were sheltered. All but 10 of them were sheltered. And all 156 of those that were sheltered by Carpenter's Shelter. The 10 unsheltered, where did we find them if they weren't in shelter? Stands of trees, sometimes in parks, under bridges, in parking garages. For a January night, it's pretty cold and dark. And so fortunately, all but 10, we were able to get sheltered. We can't necessarily convince those 10 to come in, but we try as best as we can. And similar question that I frequently get is around veterans. 10 of the 166 were veterans as well. So, last element I will point out, of that 166, 65 of them were families with children. They were in families. 101 were people that were single. So just to give some idea of scale. Yes.
I have a recollection years ago when I first went to the original warehouse area, that the impetus of that was from people that a minister from Church of the Pilgrims or Luther Place, one of the other two very instrumental people I'll never forget, and I can't remember their name, but they, maybe you remember, you know, from your records, but I do recall those two, and that to me was the beginning. Mm-hmm. Those folks that came from those churches.
Yeah. I can tell you that with the faith communities that we have, some of them have been so very routine and regular in a positive way for decades now, for more than 35 years. And some of it, I can't help but grin. So for example, I can tell you that the second Tuesday of the month for dinner, St. John Newman Catholic Church out of Reston drives down to Alexandria because this is what they've done for more than 30 years. And over time, as people age, some retire from volunteering and new ones come on board. But that process of exposing and educating and engaging, it's part of what makes this all work. Yeah. Yep. Yes.
I follow the process that how do you transition somebody from being homeless and housingless to successful housing? I mean, you go out, you find the apartment, and you go, everybody's happy with the apartment, and they get ready, they move in. How do you make that transition?
Yeah.
From being,
Yep, that's a great question. And it's like, that's the nut to crack with every resident that we have. So spot on in thinking about and talking about that. There is the financial end of the equation, which is real. How do they actually afford it? We don't want to put people in housing and prop them up financially and then need to back away because we don't have a permanent means to pay anybody's rent for them long term. So we need to help them with an eye to what can they actually afford on their own. But part of what we need to also do is breathe belief into them that something different is possible for them. Because I can tell you there's nothing worse than the look in someone's eyes the first time that they come into shelter. Look, I think Carpenter Shelter is great. I am totally biased. I think we provide a much needed, top-notch service in our community. But I also know nobody really wants to be there. They're there because they have to be there. And their look in their eyes when they walk through the shelter doors the first time, there is fear, there is anxiety, and everything they've heard about shelters tells them it's probably going to be unsafe and this is not going to be pleasant. And the onus is on us to deliver something different than their expectation. And we do really well with it, but it takes some not only financial hard work in order for them to get rehoused, but it also just takes some belief on their part that something can be different.
provide the things that people will need.
Yes, yes. Yeah, what additional things can we provide to them to help them stabilize? One of the things we learned at Carpenters is we can get people rehoused, and pretty much across the board there's deep gratitude for the help that they receive. And sometimes there is deep gratitude and they don't necessarily want to let on what they still do need. So we learned to start asking, do you have a bed? I can tell you this, when they have lost everything, they probably didn't put everything in storage. They just got evicted and they lost it, and they don't have a bed. And so we end up having donated to the shelter from many generous donors more blow-up beds than you can imagine. So we end up getting people rehoused, ask them, do you have a bed, and then make sure that they aren't sleeping on the floor in that apartment. And so that happens with, we partner very closely with Alive and their furniture delivery program as well. There are things that, phenomenal things that Alive does in that sense, and very much also rooted in the community and very supported by a lot of faith communities as well. But yes, it's a whole process of helping them see and believe something different.
This all sounds good, and Alexandria is just a part of a much bigger metropolitan area, and I suspect that the problem is really more metropolitan area-wide than just Alexandria. Can you talk about how Carpenters fits into that whole bigger picture?
Yes, great question. So on the point-in-time count as a demonstration, Alexandria's number this last January was 166, as we talked about. The DMV area as a whole, 9,659 people. 9,659 people. Overwhelming majority are in the District of Columbia. Carpenters provides the widest array of services for people that are homeless in Alexandria. We only provide services right now to people that are homeless in Alexandria. And Arlington County tends to want to take care of their own, and Prince William takes care of their own, and Loudoun and Fairfax. Each jurisdiction tends to, if someone comes from one jurisdiction into another, they will generally be redirected back to their home community, because you can more quickly and effectively get people reestablished where they have existing resources and a network, unless there's one caveat. Oftentimes, if there are pronounced substance abuse issues and that going back to that community is going to only lead them back into more use, then it's not a good idea for them to go back. And so that's the one piece where we generally try not to direct people back to where they're established. Yeah. Hang on. Ann?
Thank you. Shannon, what can we here at Goodwin House do to help the effort at Carpenter Shelter?
Shannon, I've got an answer to that question after you're finished.
Okay. Do you want to start, John, and I can play cleanup?
I would. I'm from the Outreach Committee, and we try as outreachers to go out in the community and help. You've just mentioned Alive. We have a liaison person on our committee, Pam Ferrand, with Alive. We have another person on our committee, Sheila Hoban, who's our liaison with the Culmore Clinic, people who are undocumented and need medical care. We have right over here, Shirley Bloomquist, who helps us with local schools. We do not have yet a representative on our committee that could serve as liaison to Carpenter Shelter. And I very much would like to see that we can add that to our work. And so I'm asking everyone here in the room if one person would like to join the outreach committee and be our liaison to remain in contact with Carpenter Shelter.
That's
Look
great.
around. Don't expect to see a hand. If there's anybody, I'd very much like you. I'll see you here.
Yeah. That is certainly one way to make sure that there is a liaison, a means of communication flowing into the Goodwin Living community as a whole, which is great. I can tell you this, we have current volunteers that live here at Goodwin. We have donors that live here at Goodwin. We have alums of our board that live here at Goodwin. There are many, many ways in which the story of Carpenters, the spirit of helping others, it just comes right back here in that sense. And so those are all ways. If you are interested, let me make sure that you all hear an invitation. If you are interested in seeing the new facility and you haven't yet, please do let me know. I would welcome anyone that wants to come for a tour of the facility. It would be great to show you, because seeing really is believing of what that new space looks like. It's 18,000 square feet. We've got underground parking, so parking is not an issue in that sense. There are not stairs, so if anyone that wants to come, we can certainly make that happen. Yes.
Shannon, to what extent do linguistic and to what extent
Put it closer to your mouth, Tom. push it up.
Shannon, to what extent do the ethnic and linguistic factors prevent you from helping the homeless in Carpenter's Workshop?
Yeah, good question. About 70% of the people that we serve, 70 to 75, are African American, so about 3 out of 4. Carpenters has spent the last probably 8 years looking at that disparity, because if you look at the population of the city of Alexandria, only about in the low 20%, about 22% of the population of Alexandria is made up of African Americans, but we are up at 70 to 75. So there's some disparity going on there. So we talked amongst ourselves and thought, well, maybe it's socioeconomics. That's it. That's what the difference is. You control for socioeconomics, and that only gets the city of Alexandria's percentage in total up to around 40%, and we're still at 70 to 75. So there's some disparity going on there. There's something tied to race that we haven't yet figured out, and we want to figure out. Carpenters is most effective at moving people from homeless to housed when we understand and we can work with them and walk alongside them to figure out, how did this first happen? Like, how did you find yourself in this situation? And that will help us figure out how to get out of it. And race definitely plays into factors there. Linguistics. We are fortunate that we have a variety of second languages spoke on our staff team. If there are languages that present people that come to shelter and they speak a language other than what we've got on our staff team, sometimes it's volunteers in the community that we know we can call and engage them, but there's also something called the language line. And there are dozens and dozens of languages that if we know what that language is, we can call, and it's instant live translation with a real person that helps in that fashion. But overall, most of the people in shelter speak English. A small minority speak Spanish. Sometimes we hear Amharic as a language, and some French as well. And those are the primary languages that we hear.
Thank you, Shannon. Let's show our appreciation.
Let me do one last plug. If you are interested in more information, carpentershelter.org on the World Wide Web will give you all that you need. There is a special page there for volunteering. And again, I'm completely serious. If you would like to see the new shelter space, please let me know. It would be my honor to host you for a tour of that. So thank you so much, James.